Well, it seems that YouTube is so anxious to advertise, it's advertising at me even while I am recording. So thank you, YouTube. Calm down. You won't getting very much money for these adverts. After all, I maybe 38 pence, which might be about what, 50 cents. So, Anyway, okay. Yesterday we said that we now have the tools necessary to calm down and distance ourselves sufficiently from causes of stress in order to start working on upping our levels or towards being happy, and so that you're going to need pen and paper, and that you should try to write down what you consider to be the cause of stress. Now, today I'm going to elaborate on that a little bit, just in case you are focusing entirely on one area, because it is important to note that there's like a compounding effect. Things add up. That expression about the straw that breaks the camel's back is particularly relevant here. And just in case that needs explaining, imagine you've got a camel and it's used in certain cultures as a beast of burden. It's used to carry things. Sometimes as a mode of transport, but particularly to carry goods and homes in the case of certain nomadic peoples. So imagine that you've got any kind of mode of transport. This would include ordinary motorized vehicles, and you keep adding weight and adding weight and adding weight, and they're small, but together they add up. So if you add a piece of straw and a piece of straw and a piece of straw, eventually each piece of straw is quite light, but together they can build up to an absolutely massive weight. And an example of this is a paper. When you go and buy paper for a printer, each sheet of paper by itself is very, very light, but that block of 200 sheets is actually quite heavy. And if you have 3 or 4 blocks of sheets, say you plan to do a lot of printing, then you're looking at a couple of kilograms, maybe more, of weight. So imagine that each sheet of paper or straw is placed on the back of the camel. Eventually it all weighs down. Now imagine also that each of those sheets of paper is a mini source of stress, and that you already have the equivalent of big blocks of paper on your shoulders, and you are the beast of burden in this particular I should be looking over there, in this particular metaphor. So you're carrying, like the other metaphor of Atlas with the world on his shoulders. You're carrying around all this stress with you. So you may think that your stress derives only from your place of work. You may think it derives only from a particular toxic relationship. You may think it only derives from your finances, and that everything else is okay. But if one big source of stress is working in conjunction with smaller causes of stress, then you the reason that they compound like that, they build together, is that you've already got an emotional adverse reaction to the big source of stress. Let's, for example, say that you don't like your job and very, very long hours, or you've got 2 or 3 jobs, very, very long hours, and you're exhausted and you cannot cope. And then you think your finances are okay, but you have to keep checking on them to make sure that you have paid off your bills at the end of the month, because otherwise you could get a bad credit report. So you may consider that to be a miniature source of stress, but that in itself is causing an adverse emotional response of a smaller size, but it would add to the larger one about your job or jobs. And then maybe you have an argument with somebody, you have a falling out with a friend, or not a falling out, but you feel maybe you want to support that friend and they're going through a rough time in their life, and you start worrying about them. It doesn't have to be that you've argued with them. It could be just that you're worried about them. You could be worried about how your children are doing at school. You could be worried about the health of your parents. Again, they're fairly major, I would imagine. If you're a worrier, then that means that that's going to be at least medium sized, possibly big. So again, adding to the stress with your job. There could be some small problem with your home. There could be, I don't know, noise from the street, noisy neighbours. You could be the noisy neighbour. There could be a clock which ticks too loud. Something even as small as a fly getting in and buzzing around and just driving you nuts. If it's too hot, if it's too cold, and you don't have a way of turning the temperature, adjusting it so that it becomes more comfortable, all these things together can add up. And that is why I'm saying get a pen, get a piece of paper, and write down everything in different lines, and then next to each one on a scale of 1 to 10 or 1 to 100, if that works better for you, give it a score. If it is the heat and it's a very bad summer right now for you, then that might be 80. You could be like a friend of mine who he can cope with extremes of temperature. He doesn't mind when it's cold, he doesn't mind when it's hot. That would be a 1 for him if it's any form of stress whatsoever. Some people don't care about bills. They run up massive amounts and they don't really care. Other people fret over spending any amount of money. So these are the things you write down, and then add them all up. I'm not saying out of 100 or anything like that, but add up the number and see how large it is. I'll give you an idea. Maybe if you have, say, 10 for each point of stress, or 100 if that's the case, then if you got, say, 5 stress points and you assign them 10 each, that would be 50. So you get an idea of all the things that are going on in your life. If there are more, say you got 10 stress points, then your total score would be 100 or maybe 1,000, and it'll give you an idea of how you see the amount of stress in your life. Okay, we'll look at each one. Start looking at each one of the areas of stress from tomorrow and seeing what possible courses of action we can take over them. Okay, you're over there. Good night.